everyone, and welcome to episode 4 of the podcast series, all about the incredible lives of people who work at Royal Worcester. My name is Emillia, and I'm 12 years old, and I am joined by Esme.
Hello, I'm Esme, and I'm 11 years old.
And Summer.
Hello, I'm 12 years old as well. We have all been working with our history teacher, Miss Thatcher, and journalist called Julia to help us put this together. We had the privilege of having Julia come into our classroom and teach us about some of the workers, which really helped inspire us to get involved in this project.
In this podcast series, we have already heard some really fascinating stories, so please enjoy our podcast about a painter, Bryan Cox. He worked at the factory from 1949 to 1994, and the reason we have chosen him is because we really enjoy listening to his tales of mischief in the factory and hearing about some of the incredible pieces he has painted. We hope you enjoy!
As someone who has always enjoyed art, especially at school, I was really excited to hear about Bryan being a porcelain painter. It has been great to find out about some of the intricate designs and delicate painting he had to complete. In 2007, Bryan recorded an oral history interview about his working life. At the beginning of it, he talks about when he started painting as an apprentice and some of the responsibilities he had to take on.
My mother took my work down to the porcelain to show them, and they said they'd give me a 3 months trial. So I went there, and 3 months led to 30 years in the end. For about 6 to 8 months, you just drew, and you didn't use what you do now, Chinograph pencils. You used to use black ink, Indian ink, and with a brush. And you drew, and you drew, and you drew until you got it right. And I remember we all did this. We had one plate, a very old master's plate with cockerels all done in different shades of blue on a plate. We dissected it into various sections, and you had to get that drawn into all them sections absolutely correct before Ted Townend would say, right, now we'll start you on doing a bit of mixing colour and painting.
Clearly, Royal Worcester were really strict about your work, always wanting perfection.
It's just like being in school in history lessons.
Once the apprentices have got the drawing right, they were allowed to move on to paint. Here Bryan talks about some of the expensive paints he got to use.
You only had primary colours. You literally had a yellow, an 18 yellow, you had an orange, you had a 825 green, you had 867 blue, you had a light blue, we had the brown. The fruit is painted with 2 pinks. You don't mix it with 1 pink. It's a hard kiln and a regular mixed together. And that's very expensive because the pink's got gold in. Today, you'd pay about £300 or £400 for a jam jar size of pink. That's how dear it is.
Oh wow, that's insane. They must have spent a fortune on paint.
It's so crazy to think of the process of mixing colours. It's really not as straightforward as I first thought.
Bryan became a very skilled painter, especially in painting models of horses. Royal Worcester was famous for producing these. They made a lot of models of racehorses and military horses, as well as models of the royal family on horseback. I myself have a huge love of horses and horse riding, so I was really intrigued by this. Some of the models Bryan painted were really huge. One was called Cheltenham. It was of 2 horses and their jockeys, designed by a famous modeller called Bernard Winskill. Here Bryan describes the challenges of painting it.
Cheltenham was a heck of a job that Cheltenham was. Even the engineers came up and said, well, what if we put it on pulleys so you can handle it? Because it's so big. I said, well, what about the wet colour? Oh yeah, we can't use that, can we? So in the end I had to do it as best as possible. And I always remember the fellow downstairs who used to examine it when it was painted called me down and said, you've missed a bit down under here. I said, well, yeah, you try and paint it wet and not hold it on your lap. So you're resting it on your lap all fired. It was a huge model. I think it was about nearly 2 foot in length and certainly a foot high. Yeah. And there was 2, not 1, there was 2. And jockeys on as well, of course. Yeah, it was a massive thing. That's how I got my arthritis, was through handling something like that.
No wonder Bryan is proud of that. I mean, this model is huge. Bryan really did have to do such skilled work.
The pressure of working under such conditions must have been hard, and the painters sometimes needed to let off steam, which led us on to some good stories of getting up to mischief. One of the main reasons Esme, Summer and myself were so fascinated by Bryan was all of the funny stories of mischief he told Julia. We did find this funny, full well knowing we would never be able to get away with any of this now.
There was one instance, I came back one dinner time, because I used to go home to dinner, and every chair was tied up to the ceiling. And nobody admitted who it was. And we had the foreman, Horace, we had the manager, Bailey, his name was, and he came up and he sprayed all our cards, clocking cards, and he said, if somebody doesn't say who did this in the next 5 minutes, he said, you're all going home. Anyway, somebody who hadn't even done it said, oh, it was me. And it wasn't. Whoever had done it never admitted to it. Oh, and another thing we used to do, we used to get wasps, and we used to blow smoke over them, and then we'd put on somebody's seat, and they'd sit on it, yeah. Or, like the old ones used to do, one of the fellas used to fall asleep, so they used to go and tie his shoelaces up and then set a light to them and wake him up.
Ooh, that sounds really nasty, and a bit painful as well.
How funny would it have been to see all of those chairs hanging from the roof? I would have feared getting caught and the trouble. Mum and Dad would have killed me.
Well, that's not all. Bryan and his friends got up to some more mischief in the factory.
There was something all the time. And poor Horace, he went through murder. He used to like going to the ketch for a drink, so we used to draw little pot-bellied men coming up the stairs, and with a sign, this way to the ketch. Oh, we used to treat him something awful. And another time, I used to go to work on a motorbike, and my dad worked at the railway, so he gave me one of these big, long Macs to wear on my motorbike. And one of the lads, when Horace went downstairs, he used to get this Mac, put it on, go in his room, put his trilby hat on and fool around in there. And he was holding Horace's trilby hat with a water pistol and filled it with water. Next morning, Horace was, I'd never seen him so livid, he really was. He got to put his hat on, I suppose it's all soaking wet.
It sounds like you were quite cruel.
We were. I mean, another thing we used to do was get these angle poised lights, paint all over them, switch them on, put a model of a bird on top, and by the time he come up in the room, it was all smoking like mad, The place was on fire. But oh yeah, they've had bicycle wheels in there rolling up and down the room. They had a dog in there one day when I came back, fetched a stray dog in.
What a man. It's incredible to think that Bryan could remember so much. I hope I'm that good at remembering stuff when I'm his age.
Bryan stopped working at Worcester Porcelain Factory in 1994, but he carried on painting for pleasure.
Thanks for listening to Bryan's story. We really enjoyed making it. The next episode of our podcast series is about one of the factory's important designers. If you want to listen to the full oral history interviews, they are all available at the Museum of Royal Worcester.
We hope you enjoyed our podcast. Bye.